Well, quite a lot going on in Sochi on Friday. The big news, politically speaking, that is that Stefano Domenicali, the former Ferrari team principal and recently the CEO of Lamborghini, done a brilliant job at Lambo with the brand and with the range of cars they have there, will be taking over from Chase Carey, running Formula One from the top, working for Liberty, or working with Liberty. That is incredibly good news for Formula One, I think. Stefano, top man, good brain, nice guy, knows what it's all about. Couldn't be in better hands, actually. So delighted with that news involving Stefano. So great choice by Liberty as well. Congratulations to them. Excellent. Good to see. In other news, Kimi Räikkönen might well stay around for another year with Alfa Romeo in 2021. Freddie Vasseur has put out an offer to him, which is good news, I think. Why not? He's a good benchmark to have. He's driven pretty well this year. The car's getting better. He looked very good in untimed practice today in Sochi. When everybody else started to put the soft tyres on, he kind of sunk a little bit. For a while out there, he was top 10, and that was not bad for Alfa. He's always quicker than Antonio Giovinazzi. So good for Kimi. Hope he's around forever. Breaks a whole lot of new records to do with longevity in Formula One. Speaking of which, Lewis Hamilton, they say, is poised to equal Michael Schumacher's record of 91 wins this weekend. I'm sure Lewis isn't thinking, I'm poised to do that. I think he's just thinking, this is another race. I'm going to try and win it, try and do all I can to beat Valtteri, of course. But looking at those numbers, 91 wins, it is amazing. And that's an incredible number of wins. What it really boils down to, however, is the win-start and kind of safety ratio. Bear in mind how many races there are now compared with, say, how many races there were in the 1950s when Juan Manuel Fangio was doing his thing and Alberto Ascari as well. Almost 3 times the number in some cases. So that's the first point that needs to be borne into account. And then secondly, how much safer racing is today. So sadly, a lot of drivers didn't get to race for as long as Lewis because Formula One was so dangerous. So a much more realistic stat, of course, is the helicopter taking off there, hope you don't mind. A much more realistic stat is the percentage win record for the number of races started. And interestingly, I've just made a list of those. Interestingly, Lewis Hamilton and Jim Clark are currently exactly equal on 34%, a 34% win ratio from the number of races they started. I think that's appropriate. Guess who is number one? Well, given it away already, Juan Manuel Fangio, 47%. That'll probably never be beaten in 5 world championships in a very short career, really, relative to, say, Lewis Hamilton's or Michael's, and given the number of races he started. And second, a pretty clear second, is the aforementioned Alberto Ascari, 40.6% win ratio for Alberto Ascari. And don't forget, Dennis Jenkinson, one of the greatest of all journalists, and I say not only that as because of his writing and the way he looked at racing, but also because he understood the history of the sport and knew what drivers could do, always rated Ascari higher and ahead of Fangio. So Ascari 40.6. Sadly, his career cut off in its prime in 1955 when he had that testing accident at Monza. Other interesting ones, so Jim Clark and Lewis then on 34%, and then you've got Ayrton Senna, Michael's on 29, Ayrton Senna 25, Prost 25. Interesting that Prost and Senna equal on 25% win to start ratio, and Jackie Stewart 27%, and Stirling Moss, even though we think of Stirling as the driver who never won the World Championship, and we don't think of him winning a whole bunch of races as a result, nonetheless had a win ratio of 24%. There's something else I'd say here as well, which of course is that many of these drivers that I've mentioned also won a lot of non-championship races. So if you take into account Jim Clark's non-championship Formula One wins, he's ahead of Lewis for sure. Anyway, 34%, Jim Clark, Lewis Hamilton equal. I can live with that. Why not? This is my Charter Hall notebook, by the way. Charter Hall being one of the mega circuits of the world where Jimmy and indeed Jackie Stewart had some of their very early races up in Scotland. Kind of exists still. It's a sort of barren mass of tarmac and weeds now, but it's kind of that. Anyway, getting sidetracked as ever. One of my favorite bits of the Sochi lap is the turn 12-13 section. 12 is the long, fast left-hander with the straight leading up to it, and that's the fastest point of the circuit. That straight, 322 kilometers an hour in the case of a Mercedes driven by Valtteri Bottas, Lewis Hamilton, 322. Then they go into this very quick left-hander, which is still flat, but they know then in their minds, they've got the tight right coming up. And this is effectively the beginning of Sector 3. And Sector 3 at Sochi is kind of, 90 degrees, bouncing off the curbs, the bit that Lewis Hamilton hated when he first got there. But now he seems to have got his head around. He saves his tyres for that part of the lap. Valtteri's always been good at Sector 3. But this is the beginning of Sector 3, and it's one of the great bits of road, I think. It's a little bit like the last corner at the old Valencia circuit, which was a very, very quick right-hander followed by a tight left onto the pit straight. Except this, of course, is a tight right, and it's a very quick left-hander. And what is interesting at Sochi is to see how many cars are actually locking the left front, as distinct from the right front, as they're going into the right-hander. Normally, you'd lock the inside front if you're braking a little bit too late. But a lot of them are locking the left front, and that's because they're coming through the very, very quick left-hander. They have a lot of load on the car as they're starting to hit the brakes, and as they're doing that with the load on the right-hand side, of course, it's going to be the left front. If they're braking too hard or they haven't got it quite right, it's the left front that's going to lock. Sometimes, of course, you see them just coming through and then just braking too late into the right and locking it inside front. That's a sure sign that they've probably taken a very wide entry on the left-hander, giving themselves lots of room to stop the car, and then try to get in a little bit too quick and just locked up. The great drivers are not starting on the right-hand side of the left-hander and giving themselves that bit of straight road. However, what they're doing is still keeping the corner fairly short, because what that does is it's relatively easy to do, easy for me to say, but you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about the great Grand Prix drivers here. It's relatively easy to take a wide approach into that left and then to get a nice straight bit where you can stop the car for the right-hander. But that's a long corner. That's a long and relatively slow way of doing that. The best and the fastest and most efficient way for that whole section of road is to be about middle of the road as you're going through the left, and then with load on the car, you've got to then try to find some sort of little flat area where you can get the car stopped, but you've got to be really, really gentle in the initial brake application. And then whilst you're braking, you've got to be coming out of the brake pedal pressure at exactly the right rate for loading up the steering into the right-hander. I thought it was really interesting today to see how many times Lewis was trying that on different sets of tyres with the circuit track grip level evolving. You could see him doing that, and on several occasions it wasn't a lock-up, it was just like, oh no, I haven't got the grip level. But you can be sure when the track picks up more grip tomorrow and he's on a good set of tyres, he will get that section absolutely perfect. I thought Lando Norris looked really good there. I thought George Russell actually looked really good there as well. Valtteri, very, very smooth. When he's in Sochi, for some reason, all his joins are incredibly seamless and he looks really comfortable driving around the circuit. But there, in order to get that section of road absolutely spot on, to my eye, he's turning in from a slightly wider angle, go through that left, than Lewis. And that where, in qualifying, I think that is where Lewis probably will have a slight advantage. Difficult to see where Lewis is going to do it anywhere else around the Sochi lap over Valtteri, because Valtteri is so good there. Possibly into braking into turn 4, the tight right. Similar thing as you come out of turn 3, although you're kind of landlocked as you're coming out of 3, and there's not many places where you can have the car and do much with the car there, apart from just line it up for that 90-degree right-hander turn 4. But this other bit, this 13-14 section of road is really, really demanding, I think, and very impressive to watch. And I really enjoyed watching it there today. The results of practice today, it was interesting because Pirelli brought the softest of their tyres to Sochi because of the nature of the circuit and the time of the year and everything else. And of course they know the ambience because this circuit is being held at its correct date, for want of a better word. But Valtteri was slightly quicker than Lewis, who didn't have a lot of running in the first session, but they both got through a massive amount of work in the afternoon. And it looks like on both the hard, the medium and the soft, everybody at some point did quite a lot of laps, which is quite good news, I guess, in terms of the race, in terms of where we might be going with some different strategies. So Valtteri, for example, did 15 laps on the hard tyre. Lewis did 14 laps on the medium. And Carlos Sainz, who was P4, did 14 laps on the soft. So that's, quite good. And actually P3, Daniel Ricciardo, 11 laps on the soft. So a lot of laps can be got out of the soft, and the medium was pretty good as well, as Lewis Hamilton proved. So that was it. The two Mercs. Daniel Ricciardo again driving really well, looking good in the Renault. Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris 4th and 5th for McLaren. Carlos, I think a little bit slightly less maneuverable, slightly less manipulation than Lewis, but if he's got a good set of tyres, as I keep saying, this guy is really quick. But he did hit the wall this morning, and he has hit the wall in the past, as we said in that bit of road I was just describing. That isn't a bit of road that flatters Carlos Sainz, but it does flatter Lando Norris, I think, that lovely change of direction bit. Sergio Perez looking good, although Lance Stroll was kind of off the boil all day, not very quick. Didn't do that many laps actually, so that was a bit strange, but yeah, no surprise to see Racing Point up there. And Max Verstappen was 7th quickest in obviously a car that isn't going to be brilliant around that. It's not going to be their greatest circuit. Max did 9 laps on the medium, 9 on the soft, so it looks like a good afternoon's work if nothing else. On his electrical problem, it was an electrical problem that hit him off the line in Mugello, we know that much. When I spoke to the team after that race, they said, well, it's nothing to do with the car, it was all to do with the engine, so you better talk to Honda. And when I spoke to Honda, they said, yeah, we're still investigating it, but we might have more information soon. And the latest news today is that they're still investigating it. They don't have any more information. What we do know is that electrical. What we do know, putting aside everything that the team and Honda have been saying, what we do know is that onto the grid, Max had that problem, and you saw a lot of work going on around the car on the grid in Mugello. And there were some radio messages saying, oh no, not that drama again. And one of them said, not that drama again with the intercooler. And whether or not there's a relationship between the intercooler cooling dramas and this electrical problem, I can't say. But it's not the first time this sort of thing has happened. We saw a slide hammer being used by a mechanic, which would suggest that maybe there's something going on in terms of deflectors or trying to get access to the intercooler there, and maybe that's related to the electrical problem. I asked the question to Honda of whether or not Max's electrical problem was a chronic one, or whether it was an off-the-line thing and it was starting to clear itself even before he was punted out, or indeed whether it would have continued if he hadn't been punted out, whether he would have had a problem going into the race. And they said, guess what? Well, everything was so badly damaged, we don't know. So there you go. Not a lot of news on that one. I guess everybody at Red Bull Honda just hoping, fingers crossed, that it ain't going to be happening anymore. The other news is that Lance Stroll's tyre failure was, although this has not, everybody's saying, yeah, it looks like it was a puncture caused by debris. Looks like. I haven't had anybody definitively say it was, but I'm assuming that was the case, because if it wasn't, I think that we're hearing a lot more about it from the other teams, and indeed probably from Racing Point. So let's assume it was a debris-induced puncture. It has to be said, though, that happened at a time when the Merc drivers were being told to stay off the curbs, and there was a bit of talk of vibration. And of course, there's a massive amount of G-load going through the tyres on that section of road anyway. But on the assumption it was a puncture and there was no real tyre issue at Mugello at all, that leaves one to the very cynical suggestion that if you were Mercedes and you were running Mercedes and Max was out and all you had to do was really just finish the race without a problem, wouldn't you perhaps be saying to the drivers, stay off the curbs, there's a vibration issue, in the hope that maybe some of the other teams would hear your radio messages and do the same thing just to keep them away from you? I don't know. I mean, the curbs in Mugello were not massive, were they? They were just the sort of MotoGP curbs. So, that's just the cynic in me, of course. Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel were 8th and 10th this afternoon. And Charles was actually not far away on the medium tyre towards the end. I say not far away from the high-ish midfield. We shouldn't really be saying that. But, not a bad performance from a Ferrari. Difficult to believe they've found any more power since Mugello, but they're doing a good job with the compromise and with the package they've got. And Charles, there was one onboard lap with Charles going through that section of road, and he was just absolutely superb, I thought. You saw him middle of the road, and then the car just stops beautifully. Obviously, you can't see the footwork, but you could more or less feel what he was doing there, and it was a very good lap, that lap. So, Charles driving beautifully. And as I say, Sebastian not too far away. It should be quite a good circuit for him. I'm not sure he loves 90-degree corners, and it's his greatest corner, but he'll be pretty good around turn 3, that'll be a Sebastian Vettel type corner, I would imagine. And in general, he quite likes the ability to throw the car over chicanes as well. So this will not be a bad circuit for Sebastian. And Pierre Gasly, again, pretty good. P11 ahead of Daniel Kvyat. And Alex Albon down in 12th place, but not that far away from Max Verstappen. So that wasn't too bad for him either. Nicholas Latifi went off this morning, but ended the day slightly quicker, slightly hair's breadth quicker than George Russell. And that's it, of course, qualifying tomorrow. Talk to you then.